We're supposed to forgive one another. Next. I don't know what the summary should be. They don't have any good ideas. Jesus forgave you. You forgive your spouse. Moving right along. Okay. I don't know. What else did I say? I said something. Huh? Tante Susu. Don't be like Tante Susu. Ella Tante Susu. What's that? I like that. That's true. Anger is a punishment that you give to yourself for the mistake of someone else. And this is something we do to ourselves, and we just brew when we get angry, and we think about what other people did to us, and it's not good.
You also talked about date nights and Ellie's not being a priority. I disagree, so he comes back to me.
I'll talk about how date night is the only solution, really. And expensive jewelry is really the best way to... He's here. Yeah, so we're saying how expensive jewelry is very important. Date night's even more important. And I didn't mean it, I'm glad you said something. I'm not saying you shouldn't have date nights. What I'm saying is there is a spiritual component, but the date night obviously rekindles, I'll tell you guys a personal story. When we were married for 10 years, our 10-year anniversary fell on a day. So I'm a professor. One of my papers got accepted to a conference in France. Very prestigious conference, and I was going to present on my 10-year wedding anniversary. And I was like, oh my gosh, right? So my options are be divorced or, have my wife come with me to France. So we ended up going to France together, and it was like magic. It was, it reminded me, we had 3 kids at the time, life was over, and it reminded you of why you got married in the first place. And it was like, this is the person I married, and you just remember just just walking around aimlessly and having a good time and no agenda and no stress, and it was really nice. So highly recommend date night, expensive jewelry, whatever. Huh? In France, especially when someone else is paying for it. Even better. All right. تفضل أبونا. Thank you. So today's topic is marriage as salvation. This is number 2 of 3. And I'm going to blow my nose. It's going to be very loud. Get that out of the way. Okay. Oh yeah, I could just push the button. I'm not used to this fancy stuff that you guys have. We use these things back in my church. Okay. Marriage as a path to salvation, and I kind of want to talk about what is this concept of marriage and the wedding certificate, and isn't marriage just a legal thing that we do for there's insurance and there's all kinds of stuff, and in fact if you look the marriage ceremony itself and how much it's evolved in the church and it's become such a big deal. But legally, it's just a tax thing, right? And an insurance thing and an inheritance thing. And so what exactly is the point of marriage, and why do we do it, and why did it happen in the first place? And if you look at the way God created man, He created them married. That's the primary relationship that we have. I hate to break it to you, but your kids are going to leave you. And they're going to be gone. I know, not yours, but mine do. And they're going to be gone, and that's it. And your parents are going to be gone. And the person that stays with you forever is the marriage, is your spouse. And and God made us married. He created us like that. And so that is the primary relationship in our lives. And so I want to talk about why God created us like this in the first place. But before we do that, I want to talk about myself. So I'm a professor at USC. That was me last week at commencement ceremony. I would get to wear the funny hat and all the things. A little bit more about me. This was me 50 pounds ago. Those are my two sons that I'm holding and my daughter that I'm holding in the other picture. And right now, as Nancy mentioned, I do triathlons, and that's my son carrying me at the Spartan race. So those are like an obstacle course. So we do all these different fun things. That's my sons and I. We just finished a half marathon a few months ago in Oceanside. So the three of us did it together. That's my family. I'm married to someone white, in case you're wondering. Those are my kids. We just celebrated our 25-year wedding anniversary. Thank you. This is me getting ordained about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago. And so this is who I am. So I kind of want to ask you guys all a question. What do you think of me? So what do you all think of me?
Great speaker.
Thank you. Successful, accomplisher. And so what I want you to realize is this is my outside appearance. Right? So these are my pictures on Facebook and on Instagram. This is the way the world sees me. And this is the way I want you to see me. This is how I'm going to project myself to you so that you all see that. But I'll tell you that when I look in the mirror, that's what I see. I see a broken man. I see a beggar. I see someone, sometimes all I see is weakness, and I can't see past my own weaknesses. And this is who I am, really. This is who my wife sees, and this is who my kids see, and this is the person that the people who know me see. And so what I want to distinguish for you guys is the outside and the inside. And we're all this. And marriage is about intimacy. Intimacy is about seeing this guy, right? The broken man, the one who has issues, the one who has self-esteem problems, the one who has anger issues, the one who has whatever control issues, insecurities. And the point of marriage is you go past all the garbage, right? The Instagram and the posts and the fake, and you get to see the real person. And so what is the essence of marriage? Well, the Christian view, it's a long-term binding commitment to a covenant, right? And the difference between a contract and a contract's between two people, and a covenant's between three people. It's between me, my spouse, and God. And it's not about passion and feelings, because you're all now been married long enough to know that those go away, right? All the butterflies and the, whatever, those tend to disappear. And if it hasn't yet, I'm sorry, but it will. I'm just trying to ruin your lives, okay? But the covenant makes things more intimate, right? Because if you think of dating as the consumer view, right? So what's dating, right? Dating is I present myself as the best me, right? So when I'm dating my wife, I didn't fart, okay? I was pretending, some of the women are nodding. I pretended to be courteous, right? She pretended not to be crazy, right? And, I'd say, hey, let's go mountain biking. She's like, sure, I love mountain biking, right? And, whatever I said, she was like, yeah, I love that. That's easy. I'm easygoing, right? And nothing bothers me, right? And so this is dating, right? And I'm selling, okay? I'm sitting there, and I'm taking her a nice place, and I'm taking her on date night, and I'm buying flowers, and she's selling, right? And we're all selling, okay? And then eventually the other person buys, and now you're like, what do you have? In fact, I was going to post some pictures. Abuna, last night when I got home, he's very nice. He sat there and he cut a batija. He had a batija. And he was looking at it, And he was about to cut it, and I said, I'm going to take a picture of you, Abuna. I should post them. And so I took a picture of him, and then he cut open the baticha. And then he said, then he turned to Sherry, he says, Sherry, this is a really good watermelon. And the reason I took a picture, and took a picture of him after he cut open the baticha, and the reason I took those pictures is because marriage is a baticha, right? You really don't know if it's a good baticha until you take it home and you cut it open, right? And by then you've bought it. It's too late. You can't return it. Mushkila, right? So, I know what I'm talking about at this point. So dating is this point where you're showing each other the baticha, like, and every Egyptian man, he thinks he has a way of telling if it's good. He hits it. He looks for the ring, right? And everyone's got their own style. My dad was very good at this. Right? But in the end, you just don't know what you're going to get. Okay? And everyone gets something that they did not expect, right? Without exception. And so dating is that fake Instagram stuff I was showing you earlier. And then marriage is intimate, right? Because marriage, you get to see my ugly, and I see your ugly, right? And I'm going to live with your ugly, and you're going to live with my ugly for decades. And you know what, the ugly, it doesn't change much, right? How many times have we tried to change our spouse? Doesn't work, right? Ask your mom. Has dad changed? لا زي ما هو نيلة طول عمره blah blah blah, right? And she's been trying to change him for 35, 40 years. It's not going to happen, right? And so in marriage, it's far more intimate because I don't have to be fake. I can be me. And you are going to love me, and I'm going to love you as ugly as you are. Now, who does that? Christ. He loves me ugly. He loves me broken. He loves me as a beggar. And when I take on this image of Christ, I can love someone else broken and ugly and a beggar in the same way. So I saw this in a hotel once, and I thought I'd take a picture of it. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. You go to Barnes & Noble or Amazon, wherever you want to get marriage books, there's walls of marriage books. Therapy and marriage and how to have a great marriage and all the people selling you things. And so most marriage talks go a lot like this. I give you some scary statistics about divorce. I tell you that, if you're Christian, you get to stay together. And you say, you stick with Christianity and your marriage will work. And you go, yes, I'll take that. But today's talk's not going to be like that. Today we're going to talk about marriage as the path of salvation. It's how we go to heaven. And that's the purpose of it. Not other things. Not the other things that somehow the world tells us is the point of marriage. Find my life partner, find the person I share everything with, find the person that feels what I feel and knows what I know, right? You all know, you've been married long enough to know that's just not happening, right? It's different than that. So I read this quote by a guy named Alexander Shmem. If you haven't heard of him, he's amazing. He was the dean of St. Vladimir's seminary, but he was just an amazing person. So a very long quote. I'm going to take it in pieces for you. And this quote just stunned me when I read it. He says, a marriage which does not constantly crucify its own selfishness and self-sufficiency, which does not die to itself, that it may point beyond itself, is not a Christian marriage. And I still remember when I was 18, Abuna Tedros Malati, who some of you everyone should know, Abuna Tedros Malati, he's a legend in the church. He came to our church in LA, and I was 18 years old, and he was at the servant meeting, and he said, every problem in marriage is the same problem. It's all the same issue. And I was like, boy, I really want to hear this, right? What's this summary of all the marriage problems? He goes, either he's selfish, or she's selfish, or they're both selfish. It's the same fight. Every fight is the same fight. And I like that he pointed to two things. He says, does not crucify its own selfishness and its own what? Self-sufficiency. So you're not allowed to be selfish, and you're not allowed to be self-sufficient. You have to depend on the other person. You can't do the thing where I'm going to live in this part of the house, you live in that part of the house, you live your life, and I'll live my life. No, can't do that. And you can't do the thing where I'm just going to have my things and you're going to do your thing and we're all going to be selfish. Can't do that. We're going to have to interact. And otherwise, it's not a Christian marriage. This guy, Elder Sophroni, who's really amazing, he says, the purpose of Christian marriage is for people to reach unselfish love and cut off their own will and thence to reach God. And if you think about life, life is like that, right? Think about babies. What are babies like? They're very selfish, right? In fact, if a baby doesn't get its way, what does it do? It cries when it doesn't get its way. And I know some adults who are the same way. Babies cry when they don't get. And as they get older, we have to teach them to be less selfish, right? We start to have play dates with other kids, right? And then they play in the sandbox, and then one kid takes the toy from the other one hits him on the head, right? And they start crying, and the moms come in, Habibi, we're going to share. And you start to share, and you start to learn how to share. And then you get older, and you have older friends who teach you how to share and to be even less selfish, right? You become a teenager, and all of a sudden your friends start calling you out. Hey, that's not okay that you said that to me. That's not okay that you blew me off. It's not okay that you didn't call me. And your friends push you to even be less selfish. And then you get married, and now you have a spouse, and they teach you to be less selfish, right? You fight over the really big issues like, I squeeze the toothpaste in the middle, you squeeze it in the back. What are we going to do? Right? The big things, right, that you guys fought over in those first few weeks, right? And you learn to become more and more less selfish. And then the kids come, and then they finish you off, right? Whatever's left, they just kill the selfish. I used to watch movies. You used to have fun together. You used to enjoy your life. Khalas, that's all over, right? And then the kids extract selfishness out of you. It's the direction of life, okay? And even then, and I know you all have young kids and you're struggling and you've lost much of what you like in life, it's not done, right? Because even as little kids, right, there's still some selfishness, right? But then your kid becomes a teenager. And after you've given up your watching movies and having a good time, and you fought with your wife and husband endlessly over the kids and run to soccer practice and karate practice and misharif practice and given up so much of your time and your energy, and you like lost your health and you lost your hair and you lost your job and all the things that happen to you because of your kids. And the kids just took every ounce of your life out of you. They turn 60 and they look at you and they go, Dad, you're ruining my life. And you say, I ruined your life? Is that what you're telling me right now? I said that once when my kids were all there, and they just started cracking up. Anyway, so it's like, yeah. So then on top of all the garbage the kids have done to you, then they're not appreciative. ولاد الإيه, right? And that's good for you. Because, I'm not appreciative of what God does for me. And so now it's even extracting more selfish. Because, when you were little, when the kids were little, right, and you dressed your little daughter up as a butterfly at Halloween, and you made the outfit, and you're like, I sacrificed so much for this outfit, and I spent so much time making this. She looks pretty cute, right? And all the other moms, they're going, oh my God, she's so cute. You're like, I know, right? And so, was that for her, or was that for me? Right? When my kid, becomes a black belt in karate, is that for him or is that for me? Right? So even when my kid gets into Stanford, and I'm like, oh, I sacrificed so much for him. Yeah, but your kid got into Stanford, and you're telling everyone at church, aren't you? Right? So even kids, as I think I'm not really sacrificing, am I? Right? There's still part of it's for me, right? I want my kid to be the deacon, the kid at Stanford, the kid who got AP classes. Right? And then when the kids turn on you and they tell you you suck and you ruin my life, then more selfishness. So this is the point. This is the direction we go. And it gets, apparently, even as a grandparent, someone was telling me it's difficult. The true beauty of marriage, this little one, is found in the grand purpose, and that purpose is to drive us closer to Christ. And that really is the grand purpose of marriage. It's not all about the happiness and the trips and the kids it's about driving both of us to Christ. So I'll continue with the quote. And this is the part that blew me out of the water. The real sin of marriage today is not adultery or lack of adjustment or mental cruelty. It is the idolization of the family itself. I'll say that again. It's the idolization of the family itself. So he's saying the real problem is I idolize the family. Interesting. The refusal to understand marriage as directed toward the kingdom of God. That is expressed in the sentiment that one would do anything for his family, even steal. So the family here has ceased to be for the glory of God. It has ceased to be a sacramental entrance into his presence. It is not the lack of respect for the family. It is the idolization of the family that breaks the modern family so easily, making divorce its natural shadow. So he makes this amazing point. He's saying it's not we don't respect marriage enough. We respect it too much. We idolize marriage. And you think about that, yeah. Because when I get married, I'm not thinking about the kingdom of God, am I? I'm thinking about our marriage and where we're going to go and what we're going to do and how we're going to be and what kind of parent I want to be. And he makes this interesting point when he says, a dad will often say, I would steal for my family. Right? And many dads think that. I would steal for my family. And so think about that sentence. What does that mean? Who's first? The family is first, before God. That's the problem. The family came first. And so what he's actually telling us to do is don't put your family first. Put God first. And we'll get to exactly what that means in a second. And so this part really stunned me because I'd never thought of it that way before. So what's the purpose of marriage? Deep character change through a deep friendship. And so people today are looking for this perfectly compatible soulmate. Who is that? Someone who accepts me as I am, but does not change me. Have you guys ever been on these dating apps? You shouldn't be. But if you are, you go to like Match.com or eHarmony or whatever. I go on all the time. There's a new Coptic one, Meet and Write. Have you guys heard about this one? Everyone has a fake profile. Like every young person I know has a fake Meet and Write profile. Anyway, if you go on these dating apps, right? What does the dating app do? Not that any of you know. They ask you like 300 questions, right? Do you like this? Do you like the white wine, red wine? Do you like to travel? Do you like to wake up early? Do you like to exercise? What kind? They ask you all these questions, right? And then the other person answers all these questions. And then they have some algorithm and they match you, right? And they say, okay, you are a match with this person, right? That's how a dating app works. So I want to think about what that means. What is that saying? What is that? What are they trying to do there? I'm going to rephrase it slightly differently. I want to be very selfish. I don't want to change anything about myself. And I want to find someone that allows me to be as selfish as possible. Isn't that really what a dating app is doing? Allow me to be the most selfish human being I can possibly be. And here's the sick joke that God plays on all of us. Men and women are different. So you can answer your 300 questions and you can get them all the same. You can answer 3,000 questions and they're all the same. Men and women are not the same. They don't think the same. They don't react the same. They don't process the same. Nothing is the same. Biologically, physiologically, psychologically, emotionally, different. And so what we do is we go into marriage and we look for someone who's like me. Someone who I get along with. Someone who's similar. But guess what? What am I looking for? I want to be selfish. I like the way I do things. And I don't want you to change me. And in fact, I would like it if you changed and I didn't. That would be perfect. That's the perfect spouse. The one who does it the way I want it done. Right? And so When we're searching for that, we're going to be disappointed because those people don't exist. There's no one on earth that's going to let you be just you and they change for you. Those people don't exist. So marriage is about that morphing of myself, that movement towards another person. How do I do that? The parts of me that aren't the way they need to be, I have to get rid of them. We'll talk more about that in the next talk. And so we come into marriage with flaws. We're fearful, which is a flaw. We're proud. We're inflexible. We're unreliable, impatient, especially men. We're perfectionist, especially women. We're critical. We coward and twist the truth so we look good. This is the ugliness, and all of us have it. And these are the parts that destroy marriages. It's those pieces. And they're the pieces that aren't spiritual. They're the pieces that are the old man, not the new man. And that's the part we have to work on. Not work on the other person, work on myself. Right? And by the way, this is why the church teaches us that during the period of engagement, when everyone's thinking about the honeymoon and the afsh and the furniture and the ring, and the church says this should be a period of repentance. And you're like, why? That's a stupid thing. Well, because when I'm repenting and I'm confessing, I'm looking at myself and I'm looking at my ugliness and I'm aware of it, right? Because it's one thing when a woman says to a man, you know, you're really proud, you have a big ego, and you never say you're sorry. And if he's never heard that, he's pissed. Right? He's like, what do you say to me? Well, do you know what you are? And we're off to the races, right? But if she says to him, you're very inflexible and you never give in to anyone else's opinion. And he says, I know, I've been working on it. I'm struggling with that. I've been confessing about that. Can you help me get there? That's a very different conversation, right? And so when we are looking at our own brokenness and we're working on it, and of course the other person's going to see our own brokenness, right? Living in the same home, and they approach us, if I'm in a repentant place, I'm going to say, yeah, I know I'm like that. Help me. Let's the two of us put our hands in each other and let's work toward the kingdom of God. He's lost. So I saw this sign once in front of a church. I love it. This church is not full of hypocrites. There's always room for more. We should put these in front of all churches. It's okay. We have space. All people are flawed. Hard to believe, even your spouse. And the brokenness in your spouse is only mirrored by the brokenness in you. Unfortunately, sometimes in the church, we have this weird thinking that the church is full of good people. That if I marry someone who's a deacon or a Sunday school teacher or her parents or his parents or whatever, that somehow they're going to be good. Nope. No one's like that. Right? And the church, and it's sad when I see youth who, you know, they're 20, 21, and then they start to see the weaknesses in people. They're like, I can't believe the servant said this or did that or got angry or, you know, or abuna or whatever. And that makes me sad because then it means, what did we teach them? Why did you think he was perfect? Why did you think the deacons were all perfect or the servants were all perfect? We're all broken. We're all flawed. This is what we are. And sometimes we just expect this level of perfection from the clergy, from the servants, from everybody around us, and we're shocked when we find that that's not the case. And that is also the case in your wedding, in your marriage. So I have a habit, it's not a good one. Every wedding I go to now, at some point I find the bride during the reception, and I go up to her, I go, I have to tell you something. Your husband is a pig. He's totally selfish. And she's like, what? No, he's Mina. He's awesome. I love him. Shout of it, right? I've done this 4 times now. And I am 4 for 4. A couple years later, she comes up to me and she says, remember what you said to me in my wedding night? I said, yeah. She goes, you're right. He is selfish. And so I think part of our issue is sometimes we think the other person isn't flawed, isn't broken. And of course, that's not the case. All right. Who and what are you married to? Quote by St. John of Kronstadt. This is one of my favorite quotes. Never confuse the person formed in the image of God with the evil that is in him. Because evil is but a chance misfortune, an illness, a devilish reverie. But the very essence of the person is the image of God, and this remains in him despite every disfigurement. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. Never confuse the person formed in the image of God with the evil that is in him. The evil isn't us. That isn't our nature. The evil comes from the outside. I want you to think of, I imagine a story. Imagine you're walking with your friend, okay? 2 of you are walking, and out of the bushes comes a group of robbers, and they beat your friend up, okay? Now your friend's on the ground. He's got a bloody nose, a black eye, he's broken ribs, his arm hangs the wrong way. They just beat the heck out of him, okay? Your friend's on the ground. He's bleeding. Looks terrible. What do you say to your friend? Would anyone ever think to say to their friend, you look disgusting. You got blood coming out of your eyeballs. Your nose is crooked. You got black face. You got black eyes. Your arm is hanging. You look at you. You're horrible. You're so disfigured. Would anyone think to say that? No. Why not? Because I know who did it. Who did it? The robbers did it. If I'm going to get upset with anyone, get upset at the robbers, not at your friend who's broken and lying down in a pool of blood. Correct? But yet, when my spouse or my children or my boss or my friends act ugly, I look at them and I go, you're disgusting. I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you're horrible like that. I can't believe you're so judgmental. Instead of doing what? Thinking of the robbers. So there's a quote in the Bustan. The Bustan Rahban is the paradise of the fathers. Like, this is the book of the old monks. And one of the quotes is, if you see your brother sinning a great sin, you should immediately say, my brother is not at fault. I curse you, Satan. This is the monks. If you see your brother sinning, you say, my brother is not at fault. I curse you, Satan. You see the perspective? The monks know when they see their brother falling, it's not my brother. My brother is the image and likeness of God. My brother, Jesus died for him. What's happening there is not him. That's from the robbers. That's from Satan. And so when our spouses do things, it's very easy to see the spouse because they're right there and they're doing the thing. But it takes a little bit of wisdom to think, this is not them, right? They're being fooled. They're being tempted. They're being tried. Something's wrong inside. And I need to focus on the devil, not my spouse, who is my flesh. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the roles of Christ and the church. So what does Christ do for us? What does he do for us? What does he do to us? Anyone? This is the class participation part of the class. All right, good. What else? He loves us, good. He nourishes us, good. He makes us whole, good. Carries us, dies for us, feeds us, gives, loves, protects. Okay, good. So if I think of this relationship, I think he protects us, loves us, died for us, supports us, is compassionate, tender, merciful, provides for us. Right? Good. Right? So now, what is my relationship to Christ? What's that look like? What do I do? I serve, I worship, I love, deny. I love, respect, I serve, obey Christ. Right? So this is the relationship between us and the church. So then St. Paul comes along in Ephesians and he swaps the words. And he says it's husband and wife. So let's read it. It says, so I'll start with the husbands. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. As their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but they feed and care for their body just as Christ does the church. We are members of this body, of his body. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect the husband. So what are men like? Are they sacrificing, thoughtful, selfless? Do they think of others? No. Men are selfish, they're stubborn, they think about themselves. Men are naturally selfish, as a man. Right? We focus, it's hard for us to focus on others. We think about ourselves a lot. Right? Just go to the gym and look at a guy, he's like looking in the mirror, just focused on himself all the time. And then St. Paul comes along and says, love your wives as you love yourself. And this is very hard for men to do. In fact, this is the hardest thing for men to do. And it's as if St. Paul is saying, look, I know you love you, and I know you think about you all the time. Now, I want you to love someone as much as you love you. And this is difficult for a man. It's actually not difficult for a woman. Women are very selfless by nature. They're very nurturing and caring for others by nature. But it is very difficult for a man. So why is St. Paul giving this instruction to men? Because that's their salvation. In fact, that's the hardest thing for the man to do. And he pushes on it. And he even kind of almost sarcastically, he says, after all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and they care for it. Like, you know how you take care of your own body and you love yourself, and love her like you love yourself. Protect, love, die for, support, compassionate, tender, merciful, provide for. This is the man's role. And this is difficult. And this is where men's salvation is, because it pushes the man beyond where most men like to be. Let's go to the women. Wives, submit to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. And of course, the youth, and many of you, when you hear those verses, you're like, so what are women like? Do they like to be told what to do? No. Do they like to be ordered around? No. Do they listen to a man who's usually dumber than they are? No. They're headstrong, stubborn, they have their ways of doing things, and they don't want to be told what to do. That's what women are. St. Paul says, wives, submit to your husbands in everything. Why? Because that's where their salvation is. Because that's the hardest thing for the woman. That's the thing she has to break in herself more. You know, men actually aren't that, they're very submissive, right? You ever see these old couples, and the woman's like, Ruhana, haddi, and the guy's like, Hadr, 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 right? And he's just walking. Men fall into this very easily, right? But if he says, hey, you, hati al-bita'a, she's like, excuse me? What'd you just say? Namir hammak, right? So, So I'm channeling too much of my upbringing now. Um, but this is where women's salvation is. It's listening and obeying and submitting to a man, right? And so what St. Paul is doing, and this is important, men and women are different. And he picks the part of each person and he pushes on it. Men are selfish. Think of your wife before yourself. It's hard. Women don't like to be told what to do. Submit to your husband. And so each one has their own challenge to do. Love, respect, serve, obey. And that's where the woman's salvation is at. Does that make sense? So I want to read to you, and before I get back, I want to point something out that I think is just there, but I think we should point it out. Look, we come from an Islamic culture, right? Egypt is an Islamic place, and we have to admit to ourselves that we have learned the roles of men and women from Islam, right? Many of our fathers treated our mothers in not good ways. And that's why when a lot of young Coptic girls here submit to your husbands, they get pissed off. And part of the reason they're upset is because what they do is they replay what dad did to their mom. And they're like, I will never submit to a man like that. Because in their mind, that's what submission means. I saw what my dad did to my mom, and I will never go through that myself. And, la mu'akhza, mit'a'adeen, and some of us are mit'a'adeen, right? We have reactions, right? As soon as the husband says, hey, honey, can you do blah, blah, blah? Oh, don't tell me what to do. And you're like, whoa, what happened, right? And as we work through it a little bit, we realize, oh, my dad was like this to my mom, and I told myself, I will never be like that. And I want to point out that this is not Christianity. So in our culture, we focus a lot on men submit to your wives. We love that one. But we don't focus a lot on husbands die for your wives. Husbands, love them as much as you love yourself. Because it's a circle, right? And I'll tell you what, if the wife feels that her husband would die for her, then she will submit to him. I would easily submit to someone who would die for me. If I know that he thinks about me all the time, in every decision he makes, I'm number one. Yeah, I'll submit to him, of course. Right? And it works in a circle. And the reason this isn't, I want you to read what St. John Chrysostom said. This is the 5th century. And just so we don't think that the fathers were these old guys who had these old ideas, that's not true. They're not like that. When we speak of the wife obeying the husband, he wants to clarify. We normally think of obedience in military or political terms, like orders from the husband giving orders and the wife obeying them. But while this type of obedience may be appropriate in the army, it is ridiculous in the intimate relationship of marriage. This is Yohanna Famizahab. This is the 5th century. This is Christianity. The obedient wife does not wait for orders. Rather, she tries to discern her husband's needs and feelings and responds in love. So she's anticipating his needs and she's responding in love. And he's seeing her and he's thinking about her. When she sees her husband is weary, she encourages him to rest. When she sees him agitated, she soothes him. When he is ill, she nurses and comforts him. When he is happy and elated, she shares his joy. Yet such obedience should not be confined to the wife, but the husband should be obedient in the same way. When she is weary, he should relieve her of her work. Is that something Egyptians do? No. But this is what St. John Chrysostom tells the Christians to do in the 5th century. He should relieve her of her work. When she is sad, he should cherish her, holding her gently in his arms. He's a monk, by the way, and he knows more about marriage than most men. When she is filled with good cheer, he should also share her good cheer. Thus, a good marriage is not a matter of one partner obeying the other, but of both partners obeying each other. You see the symmetry, right? And that's the circle of marriage. And unfortunately now, when you talk to young people and you say, you ask a girl, tell me about, what the list for the husband. well, he needs to do this, and he needs to make me feel like this, and he needs to think of me like this, and he needs to do this for me, and this, and I need to feel like. And you ask the guy, tell me about your future wife, what are you looking for? Well, she has to like to do this, and she has to want to do this, and she has to do this for me, and she blah, 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 blah. And you're like, where is the you in this? You're just talking about her. Where is the, I want to do this for her, and I want to make her feel special, and I want to make her feel amazing, and I want to listen to her, right? Or I want to care for him, and I want to love him, and I want to... People are always thinking about themselves and not about the other person. And if you're consumed with the other person, believe me, the marriage works, right? That's very hard to do, okay? And Christianity in general is very simple. It's not complicated. Christianity is very simple. It's just very hard, right? And so you don't need a PhD in theology, right? The stuff we're talking about here is basics. You learned it in the 2nd grade in Sunday school. But doing it is really hard to do, right? But I want to point this out that sometimes this Islamic thinking has gotten permeated in us, in our kids, and we have to be aware that we're ruining the next generation, right? Because a lot of these college kids that I talk to, they look at me like I will never go through what my mom went through with my dad, right? And so the dad has ruined it for the next husband. Because heaven help that husband when he says, honey, could you help me with, oh, no, I'm not. And it's like, whoa, what just happened? Final part of the quote. It is the identification of marriage with happiness and the refusal to accept the cross in it. In the Christian marriage, in fact, 3 are married, and the united loyalty of the 2 towards the 3rd, who is God, keeps the 2 in an active unity with each other, as well as with God. Yet is the presence of God, which is the death of the marriage, as something, yet it is the presence of God, which is the death of the marriage, as something only natural. It is the cross of Christ that brings self-sufficiency of nature to its end. But by the cross, joy entered the whole world. I'm going to say that one more time. By the cross, joy entered the whole world. Its presence is thus the real joy of marriage. I'll say that again. The cross is the real joy of marriage. It is the joyful certitude that the marriage vow in the perspective of eternal kingdom is not taken until death parts us, but until death unites us completely. So death, the cross is the joy of marriage, and it's not the death do us parts us. Death unites us. What does that mean? Death of what? The self. And as we die to ourselves, that's what unites us completely. Just focus on this. The goal of marriage is not happiness, it's holiness. I want to read the first part to you. We don't get married to live happily ever after, to have children, to have a home. No. The main point is to enter the kingdom of God together, which means that I am ready at any time to pay any price, to make any sacrifice, and to endure any difficulty in marriage. And this is the mindset of marriage. At the very end it says, this means that one must support the other, and both will move forward together towards the kingdom of God. And so I keep pushing back on this. God created us married. That was the intent. Monasticism is a 1/50th of 1% phenomenon. Right? We're not called to be monks. We're not called to be celibate. We are called to be married. Why? Because that's the path forward. I mean, when I see young people who are just like, yeah, I'm not going to get married. Well, why not? Well, I don't want someone to keep me down and someone to tell me what to do and someone to blah, 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 and someone to blah. You know what I hear? I want to be selfish. And I don't want anyone to stop my selfishness. I like me. I like the way I want to live. I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And I don't want someone bossing me around. That's not really what's going on. You're just very selfish. and you realize that I can't coexist with another person being as selfish as I am. And that person extracts the selfishness out of you. You guys remember this from yesterday? Jesus said it a different way. Truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. And so part of being an adult and being married is trying to remember being a child. Right? You guys know when kids play, you ever watch kids play and fight? It's like they're in the sandbox. One kid takes the train, right? The other kid, steals it from the other kid's hand. The other kid hits him on the head, and they start crying, right? And the moms come in and let habibi and let's share and sharif right? And then the moms, they're like, your kid is very violent. And she goes, well, that's because your kid stole, and your kid's a thief. Oh yeah, well, do you know what your husband is? And عشان أمك كده, right? And then they start going off, and then they start having words for each other, and next thing you know, they're fighting. Now their husbands have to be fighting because the wives are fighting, so you better hate him too. Okay, I will, honey, I'm sorry, right? And then we look, and what are the kids doing? They're playing. They forgave. They moved on. It took 30 seconds. Right? And the parents are still fighting, and now the relatives are fighting, the uncles are fighting, Giddun Tit are involved, the Abuna's involved, right? And they're off. Okay? It's World War III, and the kids, they're done. And so in marriage, we have to remember to be like kids. We fight, we forgive, and we move on, like it never happened. And you say, is this, little Timmy, didn't he hit you on the head? Timmy's my best friend. Simple, right? Focus on that simplicity. This is a long quote. Should I read it? Do we have a breakout session after this or no? We do? Okay. How much time do I have? 15 minutes, okay. When you see difficulties in your marriage, again, he's talking to you guys, I don't have any difficulties in mine. When you see that you're making no progress in your spiritual life, that's again your problem. I'm an archdeacon, I have great spiritual life. Don't despair. See, now you're laughing at my jokes. Okay, that makes you feel better. Lift up your heart to God. It is an adulteration of marriage for us to think that it is a road to happiness, as if it were a denial of the cross. The joy of marriage is for husband and wife to put their shoulders to the wheel and together go forward on the uphill road of life. And you all are starting to feel this now, I'm sure. You haven't suffered, then you haven't loved, said a poet. Only those who suffer can really love. And that's why sadness is a necessary feature of marriage. I tell this to the youth, not to discourage them, but to get their expectations. Because they watch Instagram, they watch these movies, and they see these posts, and they think about something different. And unfortunately, a lot of the youth now say things like, well, my marriage isn't going to be like my parents. They had a dysfunctional marriage. They fought all the time. I'm not going to be like my parents. Well, guess what? You're going to be just like your parents, right? And what happened with your parents is probably pretty normal. That's actually more normal than not. Only those who suffer can really love, and that's why sadness is a necessary feature of marriage. Marriage, in the words of an ancient philosopher, is a world made beautiful by hope and strengthened by misfortune. Misfortune will enter into all of our lives, one way or another. No one avoids it. And that is the beauty of life. And as the earlier quote said, the joy of life is in the cross. Because you've all seen, remember that lady I told you who orders her husband around, right? And she's yelling at him all the time, and he's hadar, and he's got his head down. She's not happy. She isn't happy. There's no cross. Right? And so thinking that the other person just obeying you and being subservient to you is going to make you happy is a fallacy. It actually doesn't work that way. You know, if any of you have had the blessing of coming into a couple where, an old couple, where one of the people is completely bedridden. And you know, you see this with your own eyes and you just kind of can't believe it. You know, I came across a man, his wife was completely just on the bed, you know, and he was taking care of her 17 hours a day, 20 hours a day. I mean, and he's bathing her and he's feeding her and he's changing her bandages and, you know, her back gets sores and so he's cleaning and it's disgusting. And I'm just watching them and I can't believe this. And so I kind of asked him, how are you doing? And he said, we've never been closer. We've never been more in love than we are now. And you're like, I thought this is miserable, right? This looks terrible. What about your honeymoon? What about, you know, having sex anytime you want? Remember the good old days? He's like, we've never been more in love than we are now. Why? The cross. We love, when we serve, we love. And I'm sure many of you have felt this, right? Some of you have been on missionary trips. Some of you have served the homeless. Some of you have served the poor. Some of you have served each other. And there's never a time when you're happier than when you serve. Serving makes you happy. And the more tired you are at the end of the day after serving, the happier you are. Not happy, joyful. Real joy. And so when I sacrifice for my spouse, and I do something I don't want to do, like shopping, and I go and she shows me all the things, and I go, oh yeah, oh that would look good on you. That's a great color. And I take it at the end of the day, and she's so happy. I'm so joyful. I did that for her. Right? So I encourage you to find the cross and find the joy in the cross, the joy of serving the other, for dying for the other, living for the other, right? Protecting the other. Marriage, in the words of an ancient philosopher, is a world made beautiful by hope and strengthened by misfortune. Just as steel is fashioned in a furnace, just so is a person proved in marriage. In the fire of difficulties, marriage then is a journey through sorrow and joy. Sorrow and joy. And we do that together. Oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this, when things go ugly at home and the kids are messed up and this one's fighting and this one's chebi, right, and this one's doing whatever, we blame each other. Something went wrong. It's because your dad, it's because your mom, it's because you raised them wrong, it's because I told you not to give them chocolate before bed, whatever the fight is. Okay? Instead, let's look at it as this journey together, right? Where I put my shoulder next to my spouse's shoulder and say, we're not the enemy. We're on the same team, right? And if there's one piece of advice I give to all the new couples, you're on the same team. And every time they go, yeah, well, we know. I'm like, no, you don't. Because there are going to be times when you think you're on opposite teams, but you're not. And you have to tell each other that. And sometimes in the middle of a fight, you say to each other, hey, we're on the same team. We're going in the same direction. We may have a different opinion, whatever. I still love you, and we're on the same team. And this is very important because this breaks down the us and them, right? The other. She doesn't want this, but she doesn't know, so I'm going to do that. It's dangerous. Okay. So final piece of advice, and this is similar to what Abunam Shoy Kamel said yesterday. Imagine that the world is a circle, and that God is the center, and that the radii are different ways human beings live. When those who wish to come closer to God walk towards the center of the circle, they come closer to one another as they come at the same time to God. The closer they come to God, the closer they come to one another, and the closer they come to one another, the closer they come to God. Right? So ultimately, our marriage and our spiritual lives are all about coming closer to God, which brings us closer to each other. And the more we focus on that part, the better. The more I remove the ugly, the more I kill, and I'm going to use that word, kill the parts of me that are the old man, the closer we're going to be the same person. I was talking to someone who's a saint, and she said, any two people can be married. And the more spiritual you are, the more any two people can be married. You can take two and they can be married. Right? Because the less there is of the selfishness, the less I need to have someone like me. And imagine someone who's perfect, who just will always go with the flow, go with the other person, always thinking of the other person. Any two people can end up together. All right. So all of this sounds very difficult to do. It doesn't sound like it's even humanly possible. And so how do we do all of these things? And the simple answer is you don't. Christ does. I love this icon. It's a play on the icon of the Good Shepherd. So the Good Shepherd has the sheep on his shoulders. And here he's saying it's not a sheep, it's me. And so Christ carries us throughout all of this. And that's what the next talk is going to be about. But ultimately, when we rely on ourselves and we rely on doing the things that I just talked about, you will fail. We all fail over and over again. And the focus is to move away from I'm going to do this to Christ will do this in me. As St. Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's all I have. Does anybody have any questions, or are we just going to do small groups? Okay, glory be to God forever, amen. I finished on time that time.